a genetic connection. The traditional historical parallels are escapable. What does he mean by a genetic connection? A materialistic connection. We don't believe it's revelation. Christian again, shame on you. You're supposed to believe in revelation. But he can't because he'll have to become Muslim. So we have to find a genetic material link. And how can we explain why Muhammad, although he rejected Orthodox Christology, nonetheless always spoke sympathetically of Jesus as the great messenger, indeed as the Messiah who brought the gospel. In his theology and history of Jewish Christianity, Hans Joachim Schoep's taking up the research of Harnack and Schlattler and completing it with the studies by Clement and Adre and Shader, comes to the following broadly substantiated conclusion, quote, though it may not be possible to establish exact proof of the connection, the indirect dependence, and they mean by indirect is we don't have any evidence. The indirect dependence of Muhammad on sectarian Jewish Christianity is beyond any doubt. In other words, we can see it very clear that the Quran is articulating the Christianity that our own historical research is coming to realize was the original Christianity, and that is the Christianity that the Quran is saying is the Christianity that the Muslims believe in. This leaves us with a paradox of truly world historical dimensions. And when kuffar use the word paradox, it means we can't explain it materialistically. The fact that while Jewish Christianity in the church came to grief, in other words, it disappears, it was preserved in Islam, and with regard to some of its driving impulse, at least it has lasted till our own time. End quote. Hans Kuhn, Christianity and World Religions, Doubleday, New York, 1985, page 124. For anybody who could write that fast. So there you have it. The Christians have done their own research. They did it in the 19th century. They realized that their religion was a false religion. But there was an original Christianity. They called the original gospel Q. It's what the Germans entitled it, which in the Quran is called Injil. See, we know what it was called. They call it Q to mean the original, the quell, the source gospel. We know that it's the Injil. Now, they can no longer believe in the Christianity that they have if they're intellectuals. The people that believe in it are Methodists, Baptists, Pentecostals, and a whole generic, other group of generic, what they call fundamentalists, right? Who are people that will only read the Bible because they say this is all the devil's handicraft. And it's very interesting that our scholars we have to, by obligation in Islam, read the Kufar. The scholars, there's a Fard Kifaya, which is Radd al-Shubuhat, which necessitates that our scholars look at what they are saying against Islam and refute it and show that it's false. They can't do this. They can't refute any of this historical research. They say it's the devil. And they're all devils just pointing fingers at each other in the end of the day. But, I mean, that's what they do. So the Christians have this problem, and it lasts for centuries, and they split. And what really the split, interestingly enough, as most of us already know, comes with the fall of Spain, with the introduction of the rational sciences into Christianity. People like Roger Bacon. Roger Bacon was teaching in England in a robe and turban. He spoke Arabic. He was accused of being an infidel. He was a monk, had heavy influence. He said we have to learn from the Arabs. And then you have Albertus Magnus reintroducing Aristotelian teachings into the church through the commentaries of Ibn Rushd, Averroes, which now somebody showed me on the way over, the Life magazine, putting Ibn Rushd up there as one of the most important characters of the last 2,000 years, because they're recognizing it now, and they've translated all his books now, Butterworth and these people at Princeton, I think. They know. They're finally admitting it. That stuff was in Latin for centuries, and now they're admitting that this man had a massive impact. Now, Ibn Rushd, rahimahullah, who was a scholar of extraordinary depth and profundity, nonetheless, he was basically, if we look at his fiqh writings, which are Maliki and are actually considerable, and they're substantiated writings. In other words, the Maliki scholars use him as a source. But his philosophical writings are rationalist. And he was attempting to join rationalism with revelation, which is very, very difficult. And if anybody did it, the Muslims came close, but there's still massive problems and gaps that will continue to be there. That what happened is that they began to read these people. Ibn Rushd is one of them, Ibn Sina is another, Al-Ghazali, and you can look the Arab influence of European civilization. It's better to use Muslim, but they always use Arab. Many of them were Persians. And you can see passages side by side that are absolutely identical between, you look at Imam al-Ghazali's writings and then St. Thomas Aquinas, put them side by side. He was well before St. Thomas Aquinas. It's almost a direct translation. And they were not quoting their sources. So this happened. They had massive influence by the Muslims. What that did, when they took the intellectual, scholastic teachings of Islam, removed from the pure revelatory source that maintained those teachings within a framework, not a framework, really it is reality itself. And so the Muslims did not go astray because of that. They abandoned the true understanding of the world, which is through Tawheed, and they took this teaching, which was the intellectual and rational sciences of the Muslims, and it began to go diametrically in opposition to their own religion. In the end, they chose to abandon their religion. This is what they did. They abandoned their religion. And this is the crisis of the modern world. When they abandoned their religion, and Nietzsche is the one, he declared it. God is dead, you killed him. In other words, the God that we used to believe in, this Trinitarian mystery, it's a fairy tale. We don't buy it anymore. We know its sources, we know the pagan sources of it, we studied it, he was a philologist. It's over. Because of that, it's only now that they are beginning to reap the bitter fruits of their abandonment of their religion. Because the center doesn't hold in this society anymore. And this is where you got the leveling, their nihilistic tendencies. It has become a world of the most base aspects of the human creature. The bestial nature is exalted. The angelic nature is denied. It is denied completely. Greed is good. Get what you can. Stab them in the back before they stab you in the back. There's a book, bestseller in America, Learning to Swim with Sharks. Right? In other words, how to become a shark. That's the real title that he doesn't want to say. Right? Because only sharks swim with sharks. Right? In other words, learn how to be as ruthless as the next guy. And in a wage slave society in which jobs are completely expendable and you're given, everybody's worried about their job. And they don't care about the next guy because they know that the boss doesn't care about him. So he's got to do what he can to get ahead, to stay ahead. And this is what it does. Make myself as marketable as possible, increase my skills, bulk up my CV, get it honed down, get it refined. And this is the game that's played constantly. Right? This is the game of this culture. And it's just a type of kufa. Right? Marketing yourself. The commodity, the human being as commodity. Now, what happens is that you can't just phase out religion. You see, you can't just get rid of religion. It's too deep. It has roots that are very powerful. So what did these people do? The first thing they did is they moved from what they call theism to deism. In other words, an immanent God that actually has miracles, impacts his creation, sends prophets. We have to move that God out of the way. I mean, that's horrific language, but this is really how they looked at it. And we'll replace him with another God, a distant deistic God, and who's a God of natural laws. And this is the Enlightenment period where they begin to talk about these laws, and there's no miracles. And this is David Hume, the great, he's the big kafir of England. He's one of the big abalisa of this whole story. And he also borrowed heavily from the Muslims, interestingly enough, and again removing it from its revelatory source. So because he makes many, many very valid points, but he basically says you cannot know things through human understanding. It's limited. All you can know is the world, but you can't know anything metaphysical. Everything that we explain must be explained through material causes. Well, the man who takes this up is Darwin. Darwin reads Hume, and Darwin realizes, how do we explain the origin of man if we remove God? Because every peoples before that has a supernatural explanation, something outside of nature. Whether it's a multi-God story, some creational myth, there's always a supernatural element. This didn't just appear.